Thank you everyone for joining us today and welcome to Democracy Reporting's International webinar, Poland's Rule of Law in the Balance, Scenarios from the Presidential Elections, which we are organizing as part of the Reconstitution program supported by Stiftung Mercator. Our guest and expert for today is Dr. Maria Skóra, Reconstitution Program Fellow, Policy Fellow at das Progressive Centrum and Research Fellow at Institute für Europäische Politik. Welcome, Maria, and super glad to see you with us today. Maria has been working extensively on the Polish rule of law crisis and its various aspects, including political ones, and has notably been the principal investigator in the Resilia project on the resilience of the rule of law in Europe, including Poland. And we were super excited to have invited her to help us with analyzing the situation in Poland. A couple of house rules and notes. First of all, we are recording this webinar and it will be available at a later date at Democracy Reporting International's YouTube channel. We will be, of course, taking questions from participants. Please use the Q&A function or the chat to write your questions, and at the end of the webinar, we will have a space to take a couple of those and ask Maria to tackle them. We will be also in the chat linking a couple of outputs which we have prepared over the last few weeks together with Maria. We have prepared an analysis of the manifestos and programs of the candidates in the Polish presidential election ahead of the first round. Then now, ahead of the second round, which is happening on Sunday, we have a more extensive look at the possible scenarios, depending on who will walk into the presidential palace in Poland on the 1st of August. And there is also an article at our partners at Verfassungsblog, written by Maria, about the polarized Polish presidency and how the political aspect of this vote has been playing out. So, without further ado, Maria, thank you once again for joining us. And I have a couple of questions prepared, and I would love to have you walk us through a couple of aspects of the Polish presidential election. But maybe we would start with kind of framing this whole situation and asking you, what is the role and powers of the presidents of Poland, in particular in the context of the rule of law crisis and reform?
Well, Jakub, thank you very much for a kind invitation, kind introduction, and a very good first question. Well, Poland is a country where the role of president is maybe not that prominent as in the United States or in France, nevertheless significant for policy making and decision making in the country. So more than Hungary, Austria, or Germany. What the Constitution says about the role and competences and prerogatives of the president is that he or she, the president has the right to legislative initiative and can lodge draft bills with the parliaments, but more crucially, the signature of a president is necessary. So the presidential approval is necessary for any bill passed by the parliament to enter into force. So the president can, of course, sign a bill without any hesitation, but he or she can also send it to the revision to the Constitutional Tribunal prior to signature to have it reviewed for its accordance with the Constitution, or simply veto a proposed bill. And this veto might be defeated in the same by the qualified majority of 3/5 of all votes. But in practice, as you can imagine, that might be very difficult. Of course, if the Constitutional Tribunal rejects the law and considers it's compatible with the Constitution, the president cannot sign it into force. That's quite understandable. And in the other case, if the Constitutional Tribunal approves it, then it is the role of the president to sign it into law. So just to give you an overview of the role of a president in lawmaking, but it's not the only it's not the only competence. Actually, the president also is crucial for judiciary appointments and issues judicial appointments to ordinary administrative courts, but also appoints the president and their deputies of the Supreme Court, Administrative Court, Constitutional Court. Also has one member, appoints one member in the National Council of the Judiciary. So although they are at the first glance symbolic gestures, actually the president can have a say when it comes to personnel or personal choices, decisions on who actually plays a quite important role in the Polish judiciary. So as we put it neatly with Jakub in our scenario document, actually the president can be a spoiler when it comes to the cooperation with the government on legislation.
Yeah, thank you. The Polish system is quite unusual. Poland is electing the president in a direct popular vote, just like the United States or France do. But the powers of the Polish president are quite limited compared to those in the presidential system. Can you maybe tell us why is it so? Why Poland has opted for this kind of unusual setup?
I think this has to do with checks and balances. The Polish constitution entered into force in 1997, so it's in a way, brand new constitution, written and adopted after the change of 1989. My feeling is that this role of the president is foreseen as maybe a hurdle to the very strong position of the prime minister. But at the same time, as we can see, it can also be used in a very political way, as it was the case with Andrzej Duda, and can only aggravate political conflict. So the intention, I assume, was good. The intention was to have not a strictly parliamentary system, or not the system in which it's the prime minister that bears the full power, executive power also, but to also have this element of check and balance in the presidential office. But as we can see, with a lack of political will, of cooperation and constructive cohabitation, that can also backfire.
Yeah, it is a very curious product of the Polish politics of the 90s, but also of the past times, and a way of trying to find the way to shape the presidency. So we are after the first round. We have two candidates with top votes that moved on to the second round, Rafał Trzaskowski and Karol Nawrocki. Could you maybe tell us what is the state of play after the first round? What are the public sentiment and attitudes? How is Poland shaping up walking into this pivotal second round on Sunday?
That's a very good question with a possibly very complex answer to it. So at the first glimpse, you can still see the polarization between the Law and Justice and the Civic Platform in the end. It's the candidates of the Civic Platform, so the political party led by Donald Tusk, and his opponent, Karol Nawrocki, supported by Law and Justice, that are the runner-up candidates in the second round of the presidential election. And this has actually been the case, this peace duopoly has been the case for the last 20 years, if I'm not mistaken, from around 2005, when these two big political camps have dominated the Polish political scene. However, if you scratch the surface and take a more nuanced look, you can see that the outcomes of the first round of presidential elections, in which 13 candidates in total were competing, reveals actually that this polarization, this duopoly, is breaking. Both Karol Nawrocki and Rafał Trzaskowski got around 30% of the votes in the first round, which means that there is quite a big chunk of electorate that chose other candidates. And here I would say that the new kid on the block, breaking this law and justice civic platform duopoly, is the emergence of a new right. New right embodied by the political movement party Konfederacja. And here their candidate, Sławomir Mencen, also got a pretty good two-digit result in the elections. And next on place 4 was actually a far-right candidate, Grzegorz Braun, who was a complete political plankton in the past, a very fringe candidate, but he ended with around 6%. So what I'm trying to say is that around 20% of the votes were cast in favor of fringe right-wing candidates. The left is pretty fragmented. 3 candidates atomized, in total getting 10% of the vote. So what we also see, the third observation, is that the Polish political scene has shifted to the right. So first of all, still polarization between law and justice and civic platform, however, breaking with new actors from the far right, and hence the whole all 4 candidates, major candidates in these elections, were representing rather right side of the political spectrum. What is interesting is if we look at it from the perspective of demography or social demographic features, you can see older voters, older meaning more or less my parents' generation, 50 plus, still caught up in this PO-PIS clinch, but young people in particular seek alternatives, look for fresh faces, new faces, and they were mostly voting for the candidate of the new right, Sławomir Mencen, and the more radical left-wing candidate, Adrian Zadenberg. It's around 50% of young voters votes, and they also had a quite a high turnout, young people, over 70%. So this pivot to the right is also visible among men. Women tend to vote rather more moderately. Of course, the place of residence plays a role, or we still see urban-rural divide and the division between Western and Eastern Poland, especially on the eastern flank of the country. All right-wing candidates were very successful there. On the campaign level, to help you understand where is this campaign happening. On the one side, we do have rallies, and in Warsaw last weekend on Sunday there were 2 big rallies of Rafał Trzaskowski and Karol Nawrocki, mobilizing their electorates in the more conventional way. But we see, this is at least my observation, that the campaign and political life shifts very fast and dramatically to the digital sphere, to online media. For example, the third on the podium, Sławomir Mencen, invited both runner-up candidates to meet with him, and his intention was to stream these meetings in negotiating whom he's gonna support in the first round, streaming it on YouTube. So I would say that this trend, which we could observe in Germany with the AfD, but especially in the United States, is also and Romania, right? I mean, let's not forget that. But this trend is bigger, is more and more common in the at least Western world, to move political competition and campaigning mobilization to the digital sphere. And perhaps this also has this effect of young people being more engaged, because they are because the candidates actually manage to reach out to them. So this would be my short exercise of setting the scene where we are after the first round.
Thank you. And the observation that the young people have turned out in large numbers, but have simultaneously voted primarily for the far right and far left candidates, that's a very important data point in looking at where things are headed, not only in Poland, but more broadly with how the younger generations are now playing out in the democratic process. So, so far, what do you think, which topics have dominated this presidential election in Poland? Where did the rule of law fit into this? And would you assess that this election is a vote about policies or about personalities of the candidates?
I think both, to be honest with you. And next to the two P's, policy and personalities, I would also add the partisanship. And I'll explain it briefly. What I mean by this, of course, all candidates, they presented their presidential manifestos, and some manifestos were really brief and some were very elaborate. So it is also about policies and the vision of Poland. It definitely is about personalities. It is a very special vote, the presidential vote, when it is the candidate who puts himself, herself out there, and the personal, individual features of a person are often helping or not the candidate to win support and mobilize voters. But in the Polish case, I would also hint at the partisanship and the very loyal electorates of the Law and Justice, and also civic platform. That brings me to what I've already said about the duopoly of those two big political camps that practically dominated the Polish political scene. This is also maybe echoes the situation in the United States. Of course, I don't want to make a comparison with a two-party system, but definitely there are sections of voters who vote for the party, regardless who represents them. But on policies, or what the leading topics of this campaign, definitely there are a few very distinctive threats. Threats that dominated the discussion. First of all, it's the migration, and migration in the context of security. So here we come to the border with Belarus and securing the border and making borders safe, and closing them for irregular migration, especially here about non-European migrants. But migration was also discussed in a more context of access to resources. And here, especially by the right-wing candidates, you could really hear social and economic nativism. So prioritizing the rights and the priorities of Polish citizens to have access to certain public services, as opposed to migrants. And here I should flag anti-Ukrainian sentiments becoming really strong and heard. Not only with Sławomir Mencen, who even I think went to Lviv and was involving historical topics. Also, Karol Nawrocki, this is his idea from his program to prioritize the access of Polish citizens to public and civil services. But also this came out in the program of Rafał Trzaskowski, where he vowed to limit the access of to child support, to child support of Ukrainian citizens whose children do not live in Poland. So it's not even a competence of the president. It's a very detailed aspect or task of social policy, and singling out one nationality only points out, it's very clear indication that this issue has been played in the campaign. Next, I would say economy and industrial policy. That is interconnected with big investments that Poland is intending to undertake, like the big airport in the middle of the country, or there is a lot of talk about nuclear power plants. Also, this was, I guess, more in Trzaskowski's program to make Poland an economic heart, a strong economic player in the European level, which feeds into economic growth of Poland, which we have witnessed in the last decade. Cost of living and taxes. Taxation in particular came up very often in many programs. Cutting taxes, or surprisingly, for example, for the candidates supported by Law and Justice, cutting taxes from capital revenues, or not allowing to introduce a cadastral tax, or tax for multiple flats. Also zero 5% income tax for big families, which to some of you may ring a bell. A similar idea was implemented in Hungary. So we can see some parallels. European Union Euroscepticism, very common, very present at the right flank of the political scene. No to Green New Deal, no to migration pact, no to euro, sovereignty, Polish independence. I think the only point that the major candidates were agreeing on was defense spending and more attention to defense. This and against the background of a war going on in Ukraine, and also a broader spirit in the European Union, the announce rearm Europe. This is the least controversial or disputed policy, both by right and the center left.
Speaking of threats from outside, do you think that disinformation has played a large role in this campaign? And have you noticed any instances of foreign interference, be it covert or overt, that might have influenced the vote?
Well, I think foreign influence or malign for external influence has become, unfortunately, our reality in Europe, and not only in Europe. The prominent example of the United States, right, since 2016 or so. But from the research done by NASC, which is a National Research Institute on Digital Policy and Digital Safety and Security, indeed, there is traceable Russian influence in Poland. And for example, NASC, the Disinformation Analysis Center, has indeed identified accounts operating in English and in Polish in the social media, which were reporting, for example, on the threat of terrorist attacks on May 18th, which was the date of the first first round of the presidential elections. Also, so we can see that Russian or propaganda or disinformation, which with high probability can be tied to the Kremlin regime, is operating not only in Poland, but also to have a bigger effect in the West. It's also undermining Western support for Ukraine and generally stirring up social political tensions in Europe, especially when it comes to migration. NASC also reported an SMS campaign aimed at polarization, weakening trust in a democratic institution. So institutions, there were some SMSs ridiculing presidential campaign candidates. So this is definitely going on, and I guess the bigger the threats, because as I've mentioned before, this was and has been and is, because it's still ongoing till Saturday, a very digital campaign, and a campaign to a bigger extent than it used to be in the past 10, 20 years ago, by the nature of things, proceeding online. There was also a case of voter manipulation, and this is, I would differentiate it from a foreign malign influence, because there was recently a scandal involving one of the Polish NGOs, watchdog organizations. The problem was that this organization cooperated with some agency based in Vienna, which launched a very expensive campaign on Twitter. It was a meta campaign, spending about 500,000 zloty on ads promoting Rafał Trzaskowski and attacking his main competitors, Sławomir Mencen and Karol Nawrocki. It's turned out that this organization, this company that prepared and implemented this campaign, was based in Vienna and was connected with Hungarian citizens who were functionaries in the pre-Orban era. So this is now being under investigation, so I would refrain from any other comments. However, definitely that also brings some more food for thought regarding the phenomena and processes that we are seeing developing in a rapid space, namely campaigns moving to the digital sphere, and lack of regulation, but also maybe lacking experience of users and consumers of digital content to differentiate what is this information, what is legit information. So that brings us to all debate about digitizing our world. So, however, I would dare the assumption that comparing, for example, to Romania, Poland has not seen that big problems in interference through digital channels into the media campaign, presidential campaign. So nevertheless, the risk is always there.
Thank you, and I will abuse my position as a moderator to advertise a report which we at Democracy Reporting International are preparing with the Polish Institute of Public Affairs on the social media aspect and disinformation in the Polish presidential campaign. I think we will have it ready tomorrow, so watch our website and social media for updates on that. Now coming back to our conversation, perhaps if we could zoom on the two final candidates, Rafał Trzaskowski and Karol Nawrocki. What are their profiles and key themes in campaign, and in particular, where is the rule of law and judiciary in their messaging?
So the two candidates are very different, I would say, not only because they represent two different political camps and parties, but also regarding their political experience. And I'll start with Rafał Trzaskowski to give you an overview who he actually is. This is his second attempt to become the president of the country. He was also running in 2020. And back then, it was also a very tight race, close race. He lost to Andrzej Duda back then. And this was also a very special campaign and election, as you all remember what the world looked like in the summer of 2020. But Rafał Trzaskowski used to also be a member of the European Parliament from a representative of a civic platform, so with the party European People's Party, and he's been a mayor of Warsaw for the last 2 terms. So he's an experienced politician. And a politician very closely affiliated with a particular political family, with Christian Democrats, civic platform, as opposed to Karol Nawrocki, who till now was a director of the Institute of National Remembrance, and before the director of the Museum of Second World War in Gdynia. So he was not even living in Warsaw till recently. And Karol Nawrocki was, I guess, chosen by Law and Justice to paradoxically to distance themselves from the party. Karol Nawrocki also was introduced as an independent candidate supported by society. And with only the support of the Law and Justice Party, so he's not formally tied to the Law and Justice Party. And my assumption is because Law and Justice actually did not receive funds for their campaign. The funds for political campaigns in Poland, electoral campaigns, political parties are financed from the central budget to avoid lobbyism, conflicts of interest, and corruption. And so the money for Law and Justice was temporarily frozen due to their misuse of state assets in the electoral campaign 2023. So Karol Nawrocki is a independent candidate also, I guess, for this reason, because he could just do fundraising in a different way. But so we have these two, a newcomer, a newbie, and an experienced politician, who are also very different when it comes to the views that they represent. Well, Trzaskowski in his campaign was talking a lot about the economy and industrial policy, security and defense. However, I think he started very well until April. He was definitely leading in the polls, and then his support for Rafał Trzaskowski collapsed. It somehow coincided with public debates and political duels of all candidates. There's been a few where other candidates could also present themselves, and Rafał Trzaskowski himself could also speak live to the general public. But maybe it's also because of his ambivalence towards worldview issues. And he has been trying to maneuver and slalom between presenting himself as LGBT friendly, women's rights friendly, the sort of anti-extreme conservatism candidate, but to also appeal to a more progressive center-left electorate. But I mentioned already this shift to the right. Now it seems it does him disfavor, and he's now trying to distance himself from this progressive worldview, and this does not resonate well with the public. So so much about Trzaskowski, who is also warning against the victory of Karol Nawrocki, and the overall narrative is that when Nawrocki wins, it's the comeback of peace. And one can say the same about Nawrocki. Nawrocki says if Trzaskowski wins, then Donald Tusk has a complete trifecta and has a complete power and over the country. This will be the end of Polish democracy, quote unquote. So this duopoly plays an important role in the campaign and argumentation of both candidates, why one should not vote for their adversary but for themselves. And Nawrocki is also talking a lot in his campaign about safety and security. He's touching upon anti-migrant sentiments, anti-German sentiments, because he suggests that Germany will be pushing irregular migrants to Poland. He's very anti-European, no to European Green Deal, no to Eurozone, no to a migration pact, and all those other European policies that are trying to tackle domestic problems. He stands for normalcy, which in his view are conservative values and especially Christian values. And here this ideological stand is very visible. But what I will also highlight is his economic views and the end of social peace. Like Law and Justice 10 years ago was presenting a face of a very generous social policy, introducing child benefit, introducing extra pensions. This was really a party that was appealing to lower classes and lower strata of Polish society as opposed to liberal elites. And I think when you look at the Karol Nawrocki's program, they sense that this time has gone, that the traditional electorate, be it elderly people, is melting, is at times even dying out, because these oldest generations are more susceptible to vote for Law and Justice. And you can really see an update in the political offer of Law and Justice, maybe embracing their views, libertarian views on economy, maybe mimicking Viktor Orban and his appeal to the middle class, as it was in the past to wealthier people, not exactly to popular classes. So these are the two different, completely different visions of Poland that are represented by these two candidates and that are competing against each other.
Thank you. I will head off now. Already one question which we have in the Q&A, and it was an inevitable question, I believe. So coming into the second round, how do you see the electoral math playing out? How close is the race, and is there any way to tell who might be having the upper hand? And how do you think how does the support of key candidates who didn't make it to the second round translate to support for Trzaskowski and Nawrocki?
Excellent question, and I would have to have a crystal ball to answer it. It is literally impossible to tell what will happen. Before our meeting today, I looked at both existing polls as well as prognosis, and the difference now between the candidates and the projected difference between the candidates of projected outcome of the elections is around 1.5%. So it is, honestly speaking, within the statistical failure, statistical mistake. So it is a very tight race. And fortunately, there are also some estimations regarding voter flows. And I can maybe elaborate a little bit about that. So the center left, also this more radical left, it seems by declarations of the voters, of course, that they are more inclined to support Trzaskowski in this second round. Especially the radical left will either support Trzaskowski or stay home. The center left officially endorsed two candidates of the center left, Magdalena Biejat and Joanna Senyszyn. They officially supported Trzaskowski. In a way, Biejat had no choice because they are in the coalition with Tusk in the government. So this is what it looks like here, and the right side of the Polish political scene is more inclined to support Nawrocki. However, this is a tricky issue because the new right presents themselves as a total opposition to everything and everybody, and anti-system candidates, anti-establishment candidates, both rejecting both law and justice and civic platform. And here, in my view, especially Confederacja, which is this new kid on the block and which is gradually gaining more and more support, I guess in their not that I'm giving here any advice, but I guess in their thinking, they have to be very careful not to sell themselves too early today to any of the political camps to become their junior coalition partners or appetizers. And stakes are high because Poland is facing parliamentary elections in 2 years, 2027. And these new parties, and they'll really have to think hard how to position themselves and where in relations to still a big dinosaurs of law and justice and the civic platform. For the left, it's relatively easy. For the far right, maybe more tricky. Decisive will be the undecided voters. According to the polls that I looked at, it's between 3 and 7% of people who don't know yet whom they will choose. And as said, if the difference between Trzaskowski and Nawrocki is around 1.5%, you could imagine that 7 or even 3% of the undecided makes a big difference. Most probably young people will also decide either by going voting or staying at home because they would not compromise with the still remaining duopoly. So therefore, I don't think on Monday we will have final results because it really might be the case that every vote counts. And I know that we've been talking and saying that, especially in Poland and also in Europe recently, every election is pivotal, decisive, fateful. But this is yet another fateful election, really, which a lot is at stake in this ballot.
Yes, and I think that this is already reflected in some data that we can see with a most likely record number of Polish citizens voting abroad with the Polish migrant workers in Germany, United Kingdom, or the Netherlands, and the Polish diaspora in the United States coming out to vote, clearly highlighting that a lot of people share this sentiment that this is indeed a pivotal vote, and perhaps no area other than the rule of law where the vote is more pivotal. So, Maria, maybe you could walk us through what are the scenarios for the rule of law in Poland, for the restoration of independence of judiciary, depending on who wins this election.
Yeah, and I've just realized that I only partially answered to your previous question because I did not say at all if and how the rule of law is present in the campaigns of both candidates.
You
Sorry
can
for
make up
this.
now for that, no problem.
Perfect moment to make up for this and touch upon it. So the rule of the rule of law, the rule of law crisis in Poland has not ceased. It's still unfortunately ongoing, and despite the government change, it was not possible to implement comprehensive reforms because of the role of the president. Andrzej Duda, as he was signing many bills which were not compatible with the Polish constitution during the Law and Justice era, now he rather refrains from doing it and sends the bills proposed by Adam Bodnar and his incumbent government on, for example, Constitutional Tribunal or National Council of Judiciary. He decided to sabotage them by sending them to the Constitutional Tribunal for review, and the hijacked Constitutional Tribunal keeps them. So they are a bit frozen, and hence the rule of law, although despite the efforts of Adam Bodnar and the government, this problem has not yet been dealt with. And the issue of rule of law was very present in the 2020 presidential campaign and 2023 parliamentary campaign, especially raised by back then opposition, so Civic Platform, so the party which is now in government. I think back then it was also very much connected with the European funds, which were frozen from the Recovery and Resilience Facility because Poland was not fulfilling the milestones. A lot of money, 320 millions, were also lost due to infringement procedures and not dealing with them with the Mazel law properly and the disciplinary measures of the Supreme Court. So back in the days, the rule of law was playing a far more important role in the campaigns. But looking at the data from CEBOS, it was not a decisive issue or not a motivating issue enough for voters. Only around 7% of them had it in mind when they cast their vote in 2023 as one of the decisive factors to vote for the back then opposition. So having said that, definitely the salience of the issue decreased in the last few years. Nevertheless, it is not gone. And in particular, Karol Nawrocki raised that in his campaign, claiming that the chaos in the judiciary is the issue of last few months or year and a half, that it's this government that perpetuates and creates the chaos in the judiciary. He actually claimed or vowed to not only improve access to judiciary and improve its effectiveness, but also to look for solutions for the so-called neo judges to resolve the situation of judges which are appointed in defective procedures. And should no bipartisan or non-partisan solution be found, Karol Nawrocki announced organizing a referendum on that matter. And a referendum is a tool of connecting to the voters and asking society about the opinion and including society in the decision-making processes. But from experience, we know that Law and Justice has already used referendum as a political tool of political mobilization and politicizing topics. It was used during the 2023 elections on issues of among others, migration, open, closed borders, and so on. So I would argue that there is no genuine will of Karol Nawrocki to really resolve this issue in a way that would be compliant with international rulings and the expectations of the European Union and European Commissions. In that sense, Trzaskowski was not that vocal about the rule of law, maybe also because he is the candidate of the governing party, and the governing party has not, as mentioned, not yet dealt with bringing order to or remedying or repairing the rule of law in Poland. And perhaps this was also maybe a topic slightly avoided. However, Trzaskowski made it very clear that when he becomes the president, he will act in line with the government and will try to find the best solutions together with the Justice Minister Adam Bodnar to solve this issue as quickly as possible. I believe he also mentioned that he would also propose his solutions, in particular to the problem with the National Council of Judiciary. However, he did not specify exactly what that could be. But by definition, per se, we can expect that Trzaskowski would just be compatible with the actions of this incumbent government, as opposed to Nawrocki, because my feeling is that he would maybe not only continue the strategy of Andrzej Duda, of sabotaging the rule of law repair in velvet gloves and pushing the decisions to the Constitutional Tribunal. Maybe he would also try to show his independence and his attitude towards militant attitudes towards the Prime Minister. Maybe he would even veto bills. So in that sense, for the process of rule of law repair in Poland, this election is critical and crucial.
Yes, it's a paradox of this election that despite the fact that the future of the rule of law reform in Poland hangs on the result of Sunday's vote, the rule of law itself has not featured that strongly in the campaign at all. Maybe now we could move to a couple of questions that have been put forth by participants. I will select a few. I apologize for not being able to go through all of them. It's time constraints. But one question is that whether Nawrocki had some other opportunities to fund his campaign due to the fact that he's not starting as a presidential candidate of peace, but as a grassroots candidate officially, but with support of peace. Does it place him at some advantage?
Good question. Maybe it plays him some advantage towards those voters which are tired of the forever duopoly of the Polish politics, law and justice versus civic platform. I'm not sure if this would really trick them, but this distancing himself from a party which I guess reached its electoral threshold of more or less 30–40% of the vote. Maybe this is reaching out to those new electorates, new generations of voters growing up and looking for their political home. And on the question of financing, media reports were suggesting that his campaign was much supported by actually members of the Law and Justice Party and financed through Law and Justice politicians as donations. So there definitely is a link. Also, Karol Nawrocki says says in his public appearances, portrays himself as a victim of the Tusk state. That he suggests that state institutions are used against him to discredit him, that he and his circle of friends are intimidated by secret services even. And that feeds into the unfortunate scandals that Karol Nawrocki has been a key figure of. This campaign is also pretty interesting because there is every week there are new revelations coming out, and Karol Nawrocki had to face the accusations of illegally taking over a flat for an elderly person in Gdańsk. Now he's facing other accusations or media reports on his past as a football hooligan close to the criminal circles at the Polish coasts. I mean, this is perhaps no news to you because I've seen at least 4 foreign media outlets, Czech, French, English speaking, talking about it this week, that he actually, his past is catching up with him. Alleged past, right? I don't also want to get into any legal trouble, but there is a lot of controversies around him, and I believe that these controversies are the result of him running for president, and such news wouldn't have otherwise be revealed. But he tries to shake it off, and by portraying himself as a victim of not fair game and competition. So at the same time stressing his independence and patriotism and a complete commitment to Poland and the Polish sovereignty. So yeah, he's not in a lucky position. Nevertheless, as you can see in the polls, some of these scandals, or not these scandals, do not affect the electorate, and that brings me to my point about the partisanship of this election. That there's a quite a solid part of the electorate who votes against the other side and votes for their own political camp, regardless who represents it.
Thank you. I will now pick a very American question, but is also a very good question. Over the last 24 hours, we have seen some of Donald Trump's allies and officials from the House of Representatives and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem weighing in on the Polish elections on behalf of Nawrocki. Maria, do you think that this will have any impact on the election results? Are Polish voters paying attention to or being influenced by the rhetoric from the United States?
That's an excellent question, and also I would make a connection here that this is maybe secondary, these endorsements, to the initial action of Karol Nawrocki, who actually reached out to Trump administration. I'm not sure if it was in April or already in May, but Karol Nawrocki, as part of his campaign, went to DC, to Washington, DC, and met with new American administration. And if I'm not mistaken, he also has a photo with Donald Trump. So this feeds into first the belief of the political camp whom he represents, that the Polish safety and security does not rely that much on Europe, but on the United States. And law and justice has always been very active in sort of winning American grace and bringing American bases to Poland and so on. They're distrustful of Germany and distrustful of Russia, which the latter being obviously not completely irresponsible. But that plays into this overall sort of security imagination of this political camp. But also, let's not forget that this is also the same political family, if I may frame it this way. Donald Trump, Viktor Orban, the emerging international liberal. So this also feeds into this narrative. People in Poland, and here, Jakub, you have to help me out if I dreamt that or that really happened. But there actually was a poll in Poland. Whom would you vote for in the American elections? And Poles could express their will, or preference, if they would want to have Trump or Kamala Harris. So there is also a special bond between Poland and the United States. I wouldn't say that the US sets the pace, but there is still a lot of reference. And this campaign, when I was actually in the United States last year for a few months in the run up to the elections and after, so I was really watching the campaign closely. And I have to say that especially this what is going on in the social media and the intensity of campaign efforts online, they are really resembling me very strongly of MAGA and of American political scene and campaigning. Therefore, this maneuver of Nawrocki to reach out to Trump and somehow signal a very good connection to the new American administration definitely must be appealing to some of the voters.
And if I may add and help out a little bit, I think that the American dimension has become far more partisan in Poland. A consensus across the aisle in Polish politics that United States is a key partner and key ally can be relied upon has been shattered by Donald Trump's second administration, and now very strongly runs along party lines. The supporters of the ruling coalition and Prime Minister Donald Tusk are critical of Trump, and the supporters of peace are appreciative of Trump. And while everybody still considers that United States has a very important role to play in Poland, the outlook on the particular administration's policies is very sharply divided and pretty much runs along the party lines. We're coming to the end. I will just allow myself to abuse my moderator cap for a second and pick up a question that is more legal. We have a question whether Poland has in its checks and balances system a possibility for the upper house of parliament to influence the president. Unfortunately, it's a little bit more complicated. In Poland, the executive power is split between the prime minister, who is accountable to the parliament and may be recalled as a part of vote of no confidence. However, the president, who features the other part of the executive power, is not accountable to the parliament. So it is indeed a very system from the common law inspired setups. Maria, if you have anything to add to that, I thought it's yes, that's it. We have one final question, which I will allow myself to consider as bonus question. Maria, if you wish to engage, feel free to, but it is not about the rule of law and democracy. It's about the energy politics, but which you briefly mentioned. And the question is, how do the candidates position themselves towards the coal, nuclear power, green energy? Do we have a partisan divide here in Poland, or do we see some overlaps?
That's actually since I've reviewed all the manifestos, I can answer this question with great joy, because indeed this is also a topic which the preferences towards which are partisan, and I would say the follow and sometimes also surprising, because the support for renewable energy comes the most from the center left, from Lewica, which is, I would say, consistently their manifestos, also from European elections and parliamentary elections, they are most in line with the program of the Socialists and Democrats. So they're very in line with European positions of the with European policies. And I'm mentioning it because the Lewica is also part of this coalition, and similar a positive attitude towards renewables comes also from Szymon Hołownia, whom I did not mention because he just did so poorly in these elections, but this is another liberal formation, which is a junior coalition partner in this government. And now what is surprising is that the more radical left is totally pro-nuclear power. And Razem and Adrian Zandberg, they have it clearly also stated in his presidential program. And then when it comes to the right and the far right, they are absolutely against the European Green Deal and calling it a burden for the Polish economy and destruction of a Polish coal industry, and calling for pulling out of it. So the views on that issue are very, very diverse in the Polish public debate. And nevertheless, the idea of building a nuclear power plant that came to being, I think, well, I mean, the plans were older, but Law and Justice was definitely outlying it during their time in government. It was also taken over by this government. So there are actually some ideas about the industrial development of the country, which are, I wouldn't say evergreens, but but have non-partisan or all-partisan support.
Thank you. We come here to talk about the rule of law. We wrap up with energy, but I guess that this is how things go these days. Thank you, everyone, for participating. And Maria, above everything, thank you for joining us today. Unfortunately, we cannot answer the question who will win this election with a clear answer. What we can say is that it might be very much too close to call, and Poland might be potentially looking at a nail-biting await for official results if the exit polls are too close. So stay with us as we cover the Polish election going further. Maria and other experts at Democracy Reporting International will be available for comments and insight into various elements of this election. We will be also publishing further reports, including a report on disinformation and social media in this campaign. And once again, thank you very much for the interest in the Polish political scene. And for everybody in Poland, good luck with voting on the 1st of June. And hopefully the huge turnout projected will show that Poles care about democracy. Whichever way they vote, they want to make their voice heard. So, yes, thank you very much, everyone, and have a great rest of the week, and good luck.
Thank you for the great conversation. Thanks very much.